Welcome to another explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here today because we are going to explore a really thrilling, completely invisible battlefield. When we think of wars, we usually picture these massive geopolitical events, right? But there is actually a relentless, high-stakes conflict happening right now, completely out of sight. It's happening inside our throats, on our skin, and deep in our soft tissues. Today, we're unpacking the tactical warfare of Group A Strep. Now, to really understand this war, we kind of have to start with something a little, well, gross. But hey, it's incredibly relatable because we've all seen it. What exactly is that gooey white substance we call pus? Well, the actual medical term for it is liquor purus. And when you look at pus, you aren't just looking at a generic infection. You are literally looking at a microscopic graveyard. It represents the casualties of a brutal war fought between invading bacteria and your body's heroic immune defenders. Okay, let's dive right into our battle map for today. First, we'll meet the berry microbes. Then, the immune system defends. Third is strep's deadly counterattack, followed by the superantigen threat. And finally, surviving strep throat. Section 1. Meet the berry microbes, gram-positive cocci. Before we can get into their weapons, we really need to know their names. So the bugs we're talking about today are gram-positive cocci. That word coccus comes directly from the ancient Greek word kokos, which translates to berry. Seriously, early scientists looked through their microscopes and literally saw what looked like tiny little berries. And the term pyogenic, that comes from pion, meaning pus, and gens, meaning producing. Put the whole shebang together and you have tiny pus-producing berries. And this brilliantly illustrates how the two most common of these bugs get their names entirely from how they divide and grow. On one side, we have Staphylococcus. It divides in three planes, so under a microscope, it clusters up and looks exactly like a bunch of grapes. On the other side is our main subject for today, Streptococcus. It only divides end to end, which creates these pairs or long twisted chains. Two distinct shapes, two very different biological adversaries. But here's the thing, not all strep is created equal. Back in the 1930s, a brilliant scientist at the Rockefeller Institute named Rebecca Lansfield did some really groundbreaking work on this. She figured out how to actually classify these hemolytic or blood-destroying strep strains. Labeling them from A to M, she found that Group B was primarily associated with cows. Group C through M scattered throughout nature. But Group A was found in humans, and it was by far the most pathogenic. This is Streptococcus pyogenes, the primary villain of our explainer. Section 2. The immune system defends. First responders. The moment this invasion begins, our innate immune system mobilizes immediately. We've got these specialized sentinels called macrophages and neutrophils. And these aren't just passive guards, they are absolute killing machines. Neutrophils are actually formed in your bone marrow, and when an infection hits, they rush straight to the site. They detect the invading bacteria, throw a pseudopod, which is like a microscopic false arm, around them, engulf them, and just blast them with toxic granules. And remember that pus we talked about earlier? When these brave neutrophils die in combat, they become its main ingredient. But neutrophils don't work alone. They're aided by something called the complement system. This is this incredible rapid-fire cascade that's usually totally insurmountable for normal bacteria. Step 1, the C3 portion of complement detects the bug and splits into two pieces, 3B and 3A. Step 2, the larger 3B goes right on the offensive, attacking the microbe's outer membrane directly and activating the next stage, C5. Step 3, the smaller C3A, along with a new piece called C5A, act like microscopic flare guns. They travel outward to attract massive reinforcements of those deadly macrophages and neutrophils to the site. It is a highly efficient, overwhelming defense. Which brings us to Section 3, Strep's deadly counterattack. Tactical weapons. Now, what's really interesting here is how crafty strep actually is. The sheer variety of this bacteria's arsenal is honestly terrifying. First, strep coats itself in a hyaluronic acid capsule. Because our own bodies use hyaluronic acid as a natural lubricant, this acts as the perfect camouflage. Our immune system literally doesn't even recognize it as foreign. Then there's the M protein complex, a spike that actually disables our complement cascade and causes a thick, protective sludge to form around the bacteria. It uses lipoteichoic acid, or LTA, to firmly bind to our tissues so it doesn't get washed away. Once it's attached, it unleashes hemolysins O and S, which are literal toxins that explode our defending white blood cells. Oh, and if our dying neutrophils try to trap the strep in sticky webs of DNA called nets, the bacteria's simple releases a DNase enzyme to chop up the webs and break free. I mean, it is biological warfare at its absolute finest. That M protein is particularly frustrating for us. Not only does it fight off our immune system, but it's essentially a shapeshifter. There are over 100 different known variations of the M protein, designated by what scientists call the M gene. So let's say you catch strep throat. Your body eventually makes antibodies to defeat that specific M protein. Awesome, right? But a month later, a different strain with a completely new M protein can just waltz right past your security systems. This microscopic genetic shifting is the real macroscopic reason why you can get strep throat over and over again, and why we still do not have a universal vaccine for it.
Section 4. The superantigen threat. Systemic destruction.
So the crucial point here is how these specific strains interact with our immune system's communication network. Normally, where a macrophage eats a piece of a foreign invader, an antigen, it presents it to our T cells on a receptor called the MHC, or major histocompatibility complex. It fits perfectly into a little groove, basically like a key in a lock, and this precise fit ensures that only about 1 in a million specific lymphocytes are activated to help. But strep has evolved what we call superantigens. These don't fit perfectly in the groove at all. They bind askew, just clumsily attaching to the outside of the receptor. But this awkward fit forces a massive, uncontrolled alarm, indiscriminately activating up to 20% of all the T cells it encounters. And that leads us right to this quote from the source material. Much of the toxicity of Group A strep infections is due to this superantigen phenomenon and the resultant intense systemic cytokine release. All those massively overactivated T cells release a tidal wave of chemicals called cytokines. This creates a literal cytokine storm. The immune system basically panics. It completely overreacts, causing intense, severe inflammation and damage in remote areas all throughout the body, not just where the bacteria originally set up shop. All right, Section 5. Surviving strep throat, real-world symptoms.
101. If you've ever had classic streptococcal pharyngitis, strep throat, you know this number. You don't just feel a little scratchy. You go from feeling totally fine to absolutely overwhelmed in a matter of hours. The sore throat is sudden, your tonsils can swell so much they almost touch, and your temperature spikes to about 101 degrees Fahrenheit. That sudden heat, that is the direct result of your body aggressively ramping up the inflammatory response to fight off the invasion.
12,000. If you were to draw blood from someone actively fighting strep, this is roughly the number of white blood cells you'd find per microliter. To put that into perspective, a normal count is usually well under 10,000. So this elevated number of 12,000 is a tangible, numerical marker that your bone marrow is furiously pumping out those neutrophil-killing machines to reinforce the front lines in your throat. But a sore throat and a fever? Well, they aren't quite enough to prove it's actually Group A strep. Lots of viruses mimic these exact same symptoms. So to truly know, doctors have two main tools. First up is a rapid antigen test, which swabs your throat and looks directly for the strep proteins, giving results in under an hour. Pretty fast. But the second, more sensitive method is an overnight throat culture. They wipe the swab on a petri dish full of blood agar. The next morning, laboratory workers look for these telltale clear zones around the growing colonies. Those clear zones are the exact areas where the bacteria's hemolysin toxins have completely destroyed the red blood cells. Let's move to this next point and see how this all builds to some incredibly good news. We've talked a lot about strep's massive, evolving arsenal. Its camouflage, its toxic superantigens, its ability to shift its M proteins to dodge vaccines. Yet, despite all of that evolutionary firepower, Group A Streptococcus has remarkably never developed resistance to the penicillin class of antibiotics. Assuming you aren't allergic, our oldest, most classic antibiotic remains the undisputed, undefeated champion against this specific bug. Which brings us to a really fascinating final thought. The warfare we explored today, it isn't a piece of history. It is an active, ongoing conflict. Your immune system is constantly adapting, and in return, bacteria are continuously evolving new forms of camouflage and chemical weaponry. Right now, literally as you watch this, millions of these skirmishes are happening on and inside your body. Penicillin gives us the upper hand for now, for sure. But in this endless, invisible arms race of biology, you really have to wonder, who will ultimately win? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope you leave with a newfound respect for the incredible battles happening just beneath your skin.